Hi everyone, this is Jova. I chose to do my blog on the long economic hangover of pandemics. History shows COVID-19's economic fallout may be with us for decades. So really, they talk about COVID-19 pandemic's toll on economic activity, not just in a short term. Actually, they focus truly on the long-term effects, and their analysis is based on pandemics and macroeconomics of previous pandemics that have affected 15 European countries that had at least 100,000 deaths in the terms of the pandemic. And they came to the conclusion that we will feel the long-term pandemic effects on a economic sense for decades to come. And really, they looked at a few different areas to come to this conclusion, but their overall conclusion is that the secular stagnation or economic stagnation is going to linger for 2 decades or more, based on the long-term effects of the various pandemics that they've included in their study here. Really, they recognized that the COVID-19 pandemic was focused on, we focused on a society as short-term impacts really overall on an economic stance, right? And we can look at like how our government has reacted to the pandemic with various programs and incentives to help kind of even the economic landscape in the short term, right? In the beginning of 2020, the government issued pandemic assistance, which was really an advance on your taxes, which not a lot of people knew until they filed their taxes that year. But those economic programs that were implemented by our government were economic responses in the short term. So this study here focuses on economic impacts on a long term. Now, although they studied 15 different pandemics and 15 different occurrences throughout European countries, they pointed out the Black Death in the 1300s, and they kind of use that as a fill gap analysis for medium to long term effects on what we should expect for COVID-19. But then they also pointed out how, if we think back to the 1300s, not a lot of old people lived very long, or I guess I should say there weren't a lot of old people. And today we can look at COVID-19 and how it has egregiously affected our elderly society, and very heavily so. So they did point out some differences in longer lifespans that we have today versus in the 1300s, and how that could kind of disproportionately showcase the results here. But we can also take a look at why they were considering the impact of the elderly, right? And they pointed out how elderly people are not a part of the labor force and how they're much more able to save than younger people when a pandemic occurs. But they use macroeconomics to draw their conclusion. And historically speaking, most studies focused on one event, one country, and one region, whereas this study focused on multiple countries, multiple pandemics, and multiple time spans throughout history. They took a look at the Black Death, the Italian Plague, the Great Plague of Seville, the Great Plague of London, the first cholera pandemic, the second one, the Russian cholera pandemic. They looked at the global flu pandemic, and then the Spanish flu, Asian flu, Hong Kong flu, and H1N1, and a few others. But really what they looked at is the 15 largest pandemic events with at least 800,000 deaths. And really what they said is that it makes so much sense, right? People during the time of a pandemic have increased incentive to save. They're not as likely to invest. And we can look at today in just our housing market. And if you've noticed, homes in 2020 were priced at, let's say, 250,000. Today they're priced at 450 and above, and that's just in New Jersey alone. Across the board in the world, People are investing less because they see it as a riskier investment. People are saving more. So I definitely think that they hit the nail on the head with their analysis and the fact that our economic ability is going to be impacted for a long time to come, and they use plenty of data to prove that point. Thank you for your time.